I am Shanine Sally. As Rachel said, I am a self-professed breastfeeding queen. I have been tandem feeding both my daughters for around 3 years, and I recently just weaned my eldest. So I'm just feeding my littlest now. Breastfeeding. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about my experience. And so hopefully that will help you to relate a little bit if you have had any of the same sort of questions or if you've had any of the same sort of worries. Hopefully I'll cover it talking about my experience, but I am open to you dropping questions in the Q&A box or in the chat, and I will try and keep an eye on them. And then I've also got some questions here which people have emailed in before, and I will get to those throughout our talk. So we've got lots to cover, from newborn breastfeeding days right through to extended breastfeeding, and then slightly more tricky topics like harvesting colostrum and how to sort of position 2 babies or even feed more than 2 babies. So as I said, I'm Shanine. I have 2 daughters. My youngest is called Ocean. She's 1.5. And my eldest is called Jasmine, and she's about 3.5. And they're great. They're fantastic. And like I said, I've just weaned Jasmine, who wasn't necessarily ready to wean, but I was really ready. I knew that I was constantly feeling drained and I was constantly feeling like under demand, and it was just not a really nice experience for me anymore. And that's how I knew that I was ready to wean her. And so I did. And then I was just being extra nice to her because I knew that she didn't want to, but she's taking it quite well. Sometimes she still asks me. I think we're about 4 weeks in now. But I guess it's more of a joke. I don't know. She's got a sense of humor on her. So when I started breastfeeding for the first time ever, I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't actually know what breastfeeding was until I was 36 weeks pregnant. And I say that with a laugh because it sounds silly that I'm here now and I'm in this position now. But up until my 36 weeks of pregnancy, I didn't even know what breasts were for. And I guess a lot of that goes to show that we're not really taught about it in the wider community. I know lots of my friends were lucky enough to have had friends and family and mums and aunties breastfeed in front of them, so they knew what that was. But I never had that. Every single child that was born after me that I saw grow up was all bottle fed. And that's what I thought happened. You had a baby and get the bottles out. So I was excited to try all these different bottles. I was excited to just share all the different formulas and see what one would be the best. And then I went to an antenatal class and it changed the game. It literally changed my life. Like, I'm here now and I'm talking to you about breastfeeding. And yeah, I was 36 weeks and I learned about the breast crawl. I learned the fact that breast milk is liquid gold. It's magic. It's always changing. If the baby has a cold, it changes to become like medication for the baby. At night, it changes again, and it's got slightly more sedative properties to help babies sleep. In the day, it changes again, and your breast itself changes temperature to make sure the baby's always warm and or cool. It's just it's like incredible stuff, and it's like, how did I not know about this? And I guess this is why I'm so passionate to talk to you now about breastfeeding, and this is why I continue to share my breastfeeding journey, the highs and the lows. So yeah, first feeding Jasmine, I really struggled for the first 6 weeks, and I had so many people saying, why don't you just give her formula, stop making it hard on yourself? And I was like, I'm determined. I went to this one class and I want my baby to breast crawl. I want my baby to have this magical milk that I produce. I want this for my child. So I'm going to go through these difficult nights, and, my nipples were bleeding and it was really, really difficult. But we got to around 6 weeks and it just seemed to get a lot easier. So for anyone out there who's just beginning to breastfeed and it seems really difficult and it seems unending, I know what that's like. I know, like, physically it's painful. It can be painful. It shouldn't be painful, but we'll talk about that. But it can be painful and it can feel quite lonely, especially now that we're in lockdown. And that's why I think it's really important that we have these discussions on apps like Peanut, where we're connecting with other mums who are going through similar things at the same time. So yeah, for the first 6 weeks, I really struggled. And then it began to get better. There wasn't as much pain. And we just had to keep working on the latch. So if you're experiencing any pain, just make sure that baby is latched on properly. And there's loads of images which can help some people. For me, even when it felt fine, I was always unlatching her because it didn't look like the image. And so I think more than anything, go with your instincts. If it feels okay, if you feel comfortable, if you know baby's comfortable, then that's good enough. If it's hurting and it looks wrong, then of course, like, use the help that's out there, use the images that are out there, get help from a lactation consultant, which would be the best thing that you can do. And I know that they have like lots of Zoom calls and they offer things online as well. I was lucky enough to have my friend, she goes by Milk Making Mama on Instagram. She's called Maria. She was able to help me, and so some of the midwives that came round to the house, they physically like grabbed my boob and grabbed the baby and like latched her on, and that was the most help. But I know now we might not have the same resources or the same access, so just keep asking for help, and keep just explaining how you're feeling if you feel that you need that. Okay, so I'm going to go into newborn breastfeeding because I'm still talking about the newborn phases of my experience. Breastfeeding works on supply and demand. So when you first have your baby, your body is going to supply the most amount of milk. It's just going to keep coming and your boobs are going to get engorged and you're just going to have a lot of milk. But once, after a few days, a few weeks even, it will slightly balance out. And if you want to keep your milk supply high, then I would suggest pumping from day one. So making sure that you're breastfeeding your baby on demand. Anytime that they show any signs of wanting to feed, you're going to feed them. But then you also pump in between. And that way that you keep telling your body you need to produce more milk, or you want to continue to producing that much milk, and then your body will continue to give you the milk. When I had Ocean, so I was tandem feeding, I was also pumping, but I was pumping so much that I had to donate it because I couldn't handle the capacity. And that was just because, again, I just followed my own advice from day one, keep pumping in addition to feeding. And you are always going to be able to produce enough so long as you tell your body that you have to keep producing enough milk, that you want to keep producing more milk. What tends to happen is some women are given advice that they shouldn't feed their baby just around the clock. They shouldn't feed their babies on demand, or that they should begin to slowly phase in a feeding schedule. That is not going to be helpful for maintaining milk supply. By sort of ignoring baby's needs or signs for a feed, it means at that point when they could be feeding and your body could be producing milk and getting that signal that it needs that much milk that often, that's not going to happen. You're going to be telling your body that actually we don't need that much, and your body's going to stop. And that's where a lot of dips in milk supply comes from. Also, if you are feeding baby on demand, but it seems as though your milk supply is dropping, it's important to remember that if the baby's not latched on properly, they're not removing as much milk as they could. So you have to make sure that the latch is really good and that they are drinking enough. Because if they are just there all day, they could just sort of be, I want to say nibbling. I don't think nibbling is the right word. They could just be like, I don't know, just there, twiddling, nibbling. I don't know. But they could just be there and they're not removing any milk. That again will send signals to your body that we don't actually need to produce this much milk. So to maintain your supply, you need to make sure that milk is coming out of your body into your baby or into your pump. And we've had some questions about colostrum. Colostrum is magical. Oh, I love colostrum. I remember the first time I saw my colostrum, I was like, what is this? This is crazy. It's like, it comes in different consistencies and it can range from yellow to orange to like a pale color. But it comes out sometimes before the baby's born. And in terms of wanting to harvest colostrum, you will actively be trying to get it out before the baby's born. But colostrum usually comes out quite a bit once the baby's born. And it's in tiny, tiny amounts, tiny doses, so small that when I first had Jasmine and she was just having colostrum, I thought it wasn't enough. So I actually gave her some formula that first night. And it was just because I was worried and I wasn't yet clued up enough to know that it's okay that they don't have that much. So they don't need to be full up on colostrum. That's not the job of colostrum. They just need a tiny little bit. And then as they get to day 3 onwards to day 5, your breast milk will begin to come in. So what happens first is the colostrum and then you get breast milk. You don't have breast milk necessarily on day 1. And when it comes to harvesting colostrum, someone asked a question. They said, let me just find it. Okay, nope, that's not the one. Lots of questions here. So she said, it's been suggested that I harvest colostrum due to gestational diabetes. I've been trying for a number of days without any luck yet. Any tips? So I didn't have firsthand experience with this, but I have done some reading around this, and it's not recommended to try and harvest any colostrum before 36 weeks. So if you're not, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name, but if you are not yet 36 weeks, then it's unlikely that you're going to be able to express any colostrum anyway, but it's not recommended that you do it before 36 weeks. If you are past 36 weeks, what then is suggested is that you express 3 to 4 times a day, and you do both breasts twice in each sitting. And if you do get anything, like I said, it's literally only going to be a few drops. It's not going to be a lot. So if you do get anything coming out, then you will store it in a clean, syringe, I'd say container, but it really does not need to be a big container, like a syringe, and you just store it in there, and you put it in the fridge. Make sure it's like in its own container within the fridge, so it's not going to be contaminated, and then you can take it out in between each session, each pumping session, or each hand expression session. I'm rhyming now. Of course, I wrote a book of poetry. What was I saying? So yeah, so express both breasts twice in each sitting and have at least 3 to 4 sittings. So you just keep trying. The earlier it is, the less amount of colostrum you're likely to get. And you just continue to try right up until baby's born. Once you have got some colostrum, after 1 day's worth of sitting, so that's 3 or 4 sittings in 1 day, then you have to, I'd recommend putting in a Ziploc bag, or a bag where it can stay clean, and then you put it into the freezer, and it can remain in the freezer for up to 6 months. And then you'd have to start the next day with a new syringe, so you'll be building up, but that's great. And also, it's important to note that a lot of times women are told that they should maybe harvest colostrum for a range of reasons, and if you've been told that, try, and if you're struggling, then seek support, but continue to keep trying. What's important is sometimes we can find ourselves stressing out because it's like, I need this, but it's not happening, and that boost of cortisol is gonna block the oxytocin, which is what you need. You need that oxytocin to be able to feel like loved and relaxed and peaceful, for the milk to even flow anyway. So you just have to not stress. And I know it sounds counterintuitive because it feels like I just need this, but just don't stress out. And that will definitely help as well, because oxytocin is what promotes that flow of milk. So the techniques, I don't have one of those little breasts that I see people have, so I might have to just like prop myself up and use my own. But when you want to hand express, use a warm compress, or like maybe just after you've had a hot shower. I'm sure you're not going to have 4 hot showers a day, but after you've had a hot shower, you will start from the back of your breast, so like from this part, and you'll work your way forwards towards the nipple, and you'll eventually get like as if you're holding like a hamburger like this. I hope you don't mind me using my own breasts. And then you sort of like press, compress, and release. Press, compress, and release. And that's how, you just have to be gentle. Like, you're not trying to squeeze anything out. You just have to encourage it to come out by itself. And so that's a technique that would be ideal for you to use. But yeah, so that's there about colostrum. I hope that helps. If you have any further questions, then please drop them in the chat. Yeah, so for me, I experienced my own colostrum, and then I didn't really need it. And that's another thing as well. Like, if you find that once baby's born, they breastfeed perfectly fine and they don't need your harvested colostrum, that is a cause for celebration. Like, celebrate. Like, the colostrum might be wasted, but it's not really wasted. Like, you did a good thing to prepare for a good thing, but you were lucky enough for it to work really well. So that's great. And then next, talking about positioning. Oh my goodness. When I first had my first daughter, I didn't have a clue what I was doing, and I felt really uncomfortable a lot of the time. I was sitting in such awkward positions, like my back was leaned over, making sure. It's so important for you to be positioned well, for your sake and for baby's sake. Of course, if the baby's not positioned well, their latch is not going to go well, and then the feeding journey is going to be quite difficult. But if you're also not comfortable, and if you're not sat in a nice position or laid in a nice position, in a comfortable position for yourself, then you're not going to enjoy the breastfeeding or the bonding that comes with breastfeeding, because it can be magical. So make sure that you work on positioning for yourself, make sure you've got enough cushions, and I suppose some support as well. Like if someone can pass you things. I wish I had one of those pincer things that could like my phone would be like just at the end of the bed, but I just can't get it because I'm feeding. So just try and think of all of these things before you start your breastfeeding journey. But yeah, so positioning is key. And there's been a question about breastfeeding twins, and there's been loads of questions about tandem feeding, because I've tandem fed. I guess that's why there's lots of these questions coming up. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about positioning one baby, and then I will talk about variation, so you can breastfeed both babies, or baby, toddler, whatever it is that you're breastfeeding, whoever it is that you're breastfeeding. So the most common breastfeeding position is I had a baby here. I had a baby. 1 second. Where's the baby gone? No. Can't find the baby. I'll just talk you through it then. So the most common position is the cradle hold. So you hold baby's head. Here's the baby is. Whoops. It's got baby here. So the cradle hold. So you hold baby just like this. So the head is going to be at the breast, and then their body is going to be going across and around your body. And that's really easy. You just make sure that their head is rested in the crook of your arm. You don't want to hold their neck. So baby needs to be able to move back. You want to support their neck. You don't want to be holding it, if you know what I mean. Like they want to be comfortable, and they should be able to pull off if they need to pull off. But if you're holding their neck, like if you're pressing them against you, then that's going to make it quite difficult for them to move or pull off if they need to. So just make sure they're resting on your arm, but they still have the freedom to move themselves if they need to. The next one is the rugby hold or the football hold, and that's where you hold baby out to the side, so their body's going around the back of you or towards the back of the bed, and their head is obviously at your breast. This is a great one for tandem feeding too. So if you had one baby here and then another baby here, they wouldn't be in each other's way. So they both can feed. But when you are feeding if you're feeding twins, I would highly recommend getting a double breastfeeding pillow, because then they can both be supported, and you potentially can even have your hands free, and you can sort of adjust each baby as you need to, because they'll be resting on the pillow. And when you're feeding not twins, but one baby and one older baby, it might be easier that the younger baby, so it's like called a double cradle hold. So the younger baby will come this way, and then the older child will come around the baby. Their body will be around the baby, but their head will be resting in your arm. And that's how I used to breastfeed, because I couldn't quite get comfortable holding them like this. My toddler, she was about 18 months, and she was like wrestling me while she was trying to breastfeed. And then the baby was here, but needing to be like extra supported. So we just we always tandem fed, but it was easier for me to do the cross cradle hold. It was an interesting experience talking about tandem feeding. All right, I'll talk about that now while we're on the topic. So tandem feeding with the positions, that's what I found easiest, so cross cradle hold. But there's a whole variety of different positions. There's like ones where they're sort of laying over you here when you're laying on the bed. But you can just type in a quick Google search and you can find so many of them. The questions I had when I was pregnant with my second, obviously I've only got 2 kids, when I was pregnant with my second, was what is going to happen with the colostrum? Is there going to be any colostrum? Is like the milk still safe for my toddler to be drinking while I'm pregnant? Is there even any milk? And is it okay for my toddler to have colostrum again if colostrum comes out? So for the first one, it's completely safe. It's completely safe to breastfeed your child while you're still pregnant, what's likely to happen is that your milk will dry up and you will be dry nursing, which a lot of people find quite uncomfortable because your breasts become tender again and it feels just not as comfortable, you know, like you're feeding a child on top of the tenderness of the pregnancy breast. That's not really comfortable, but it's doable and lots of us have done it. There's so many pages that I would recommend that have actually got me through. So I think if you type in on Facebook pregnant and tandem feeding mums or group or something like that, then you'll see loads of groups. And then there's also breastfeeding babies, older babies and beyond, and that was quite helpful as well, because when you're breastfeeding an older baby, it seems that most parents, you know, who want to have more than one child have them quite close together, and that's sort of what happens when they're breastfeeding older babies. They find themselves pregnant and they breastfeed through it, and that's fine. The only advice I ever got from a professional, I say professional like this because the advice was nonsense, and she told me that I should stop breastfeeding my child while I was pregnant because she would hate my baby. I don't know how she knew that. That wasn't true either. And that's why I call it nonsense, because it was something that made me worry while I was pregnant. I was so worried that my baby was going to hate my older daughter. My older daughter was going to hate my baby because of what the midwife told me. But actually, I didn't stop because of these groups, luckily. And my daughters loved each other and they loved breastfeeding together. So yeah, and usually I don't think professional advice is nonsense, but that one was. I still remember how I felt. I walked out of the office and it was just like flabbergasted, like, what do I do now? Like, how do I even stop if I wanted to? Like, I just wouldn't know what to do, and I don't want to, and I want to be able to do this. But yeah, I'm grateful for all the people out there that share their stories. And that's why I share mine, because it helped me make an informed decision to keep going. And if I can do that for just one person, then I'm doing a great thing, I think. Yeah, so we continue to feed. In regards to colostrum, it's fine. The older child is lucky if they get a double dose of colostrum. Like, not many people get that. So that's fine as well. Yeah, and like I said before, that it's likely that the milk would just dry up, and most of the journey, the rest of the breastfeeding journey, will be dry nursing. And then one other thing that I wanted to mention, which is not the funnest thing for anyone to experience, but it's important to know, because without knowing it, you may feel like there's something wrong with you, like I did at the beginning. So when I was breastfeeding Jasmine while I was pregnant with Ocean, I found myself just absolutely feeling so, like, it's like the skin crawly, gross feeling. It's like, you know, chalkboard on nails on a chalkboard, sandpaper between your teeth, like that, feeling. And that's called nursing aversion. Can't believe I just said that with a smile. But nursing aversion is awful, and it tends to happen when you are breastfeeding while you're pregnant, when you're breastfeeding while you're on your period, or when you're about to start your period, or when you've just finished your period, which is a lot, and breastfeeding older children. And it's literally just this really awful, gross feeling that you just want to stop and you just want to throw your baby off. And I know that sounds awful when it's not a nice image, but it's what a lot of women have experienced. And a lot of women have stopped breastfeeding because they didn't know that it was a thing. They just thought, there's something really wrong with me and I just need to make sure that I'm not going to throw my baby off. So I'm going to stop. And they stop prematurely. And so I'm telling you this because if you can do some research around it, if you find yourself feeling any of these things, there's nursing aversion, which is really bad. And then there's DEMO, which is really bad as well. But if you find yourself experiencing these things, there are a few tips out there. For example, for me, I use magnesium salts in the bath, and that I found has helped a dream. There's also other things that you can do, like holistic breathing. So you breathe in for 5, hold for 5, breathe out for 5 while you're feeding. And maybe just giving yourself like a pep talk, being like, I just know that right now what I'm experiencing is nursing aversion. This is not anything wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with my child. Nobody's doing anything wrong. It just doesn't feel good because of the hormones. And that's what potentially some women experience and some women don't, which is really, really good. But I did experience that, and luckily I knew what it was, so I was able to work through that. But it's really not a nice experience for anyone. And then once the baby's born, if you are going to be tandem feeding, do expect your older child to come and feed as much as, if not more than, the baby, because there's more milk, I suppose, and because they've just gone through a massive dry spell for 9 months, and now there's rain again. I'm joking. But yeah, so I experienced something that lots of mums experience as well, and that was my older child just wanted to continue to feed over and over and over again. And it does fizzle out. They get really excited for a few weeks, and it's a whole new world for them. If you think of it like something huge has happened, like we've just changed something huge. There's a new person in the house. Like, not all the attention is for this child anymore. Like, they want that affection, they want that love, they want to know that they're still cared for. They also want to know what's going on and to understand and to navigate how to get through life now that there's a smaller person, and usually the breasts do that for them. So yeah, while people may say things like, oh, she doesn't need to feed anymore, get her off, and oh, she's not hungry, she can eat food, it's not just about that. It's not about eating food, it's not about being hungry, it's about that comfort, it's about that love. So if you find yourself having these conversations, just know that you're supported in your decision to keep breastfeeding your older child as well as your younger child, because I'm here cheering you on, and you're doing the best thing for yourself and you're doing the best thing for your child. And it's not always easy, and I guess that's why I'm here, and that's why there's so many people out here talking about breastfeeding and supporting you. And then there's cluster feeding. So I suppose you could call what the toddler's doing cluster feeding, but not necessarily. With the baby, sometimes I get asked, why is it that my baby's feeding so much? She would just finish and she's fussy again. So long as there are wet diapers and so long as she's got like poop output, then she's feeding enough, and that's fine. It's not that you don't have enough milk. Again, like I said before, it works on supply and demand. So long as you are feeding on demand and the baby's latched well, and there are wet diapers, I'm not even American, nappies, and there are wet nappies and poopy nappies, then the baby's feeding fine. And what's happening is this is cluster feeding. And sometimes this can happen for a week, it can happen for a few weeks. And this happens because the baby is going for a growth spurt. I mean, there's no human that grows as fast as a baby into a toddler, into a child. Like, that is the fastest amount of growth, in my opinion. And they go through these phases of growth spurts, and they have cluster feeds, and that's their way of aiding their growth spurt. That's their way of aiding their growth, their growing. What am I trying to say? That's their way of aiding their growth. I think that's fine. Yeah. And then there was another question about waking babies for feeds in the first few weeks. I think that I can only give you my experience. There are conflicted arguments for both. Wake baby, definitely wake baby, no, don't wake baby. I would say maybe try and learn how to dream feed. That's where you pick baby up while baby's still asleep and you put them to the breast and they sort of feed and they're still asleep, so you're not necessarily waking them up. But at the same time, I think it's fine. I used to wake Ocean up to sleep because she slept for long stretches of time, and I'm like, you're only a week, I don't think you should be sleeping this long. And I would wake her up and I'd feed her, or I'd dream feed her, and she'd go straight back to sleep and she was fine. But I guess there's, old wives' tales, you never wake a sleeping baby. Like, I think, again, as I always say, more importantly than anything else is just to follow your own instincts. If you feel like it's been a very long time and that your baby needs to feed, or that you need to release, it's not always about your baby needing to feed, then I'd definitely say go for it. Yeah, so that's what I did. With Jasmine, she would wake up all the time and she would feed. But with Ocean, she just liked to sleep. I was so lucky in the first few months. She just slept all night, would sleep. And I would wake her up and she'd go straight back to sleep. And then she started waking up when she was a few months old. So I've had the best of both worlds. Okay, and I've got a question about breastfeeding on the go. So I know that at the moment we're locked down, maybe I guess until tomorrow, but we're mostly going to be on lockdown even after tomorrow, and most people are still just going to stay in their homes. But when you are on the go, either you have to go out for a reason or you just want to go out for a walk, I would recommend breastfeeding. I mean, it's the easiest thing to do, rather than having to heat up bottles, you know, like express milk in a cup. Like it's still quite technical when you're on the go. So I would say one thing that massively helped for me was learning how to breastfeed in a carrier. So I would carry my girls and then I would breastfeed them in the carrier. And it's really quite easy to learn. I'm not sure how to link things, but I can let you know. I learned on Milk Making Mama. Like I said, she's my friend on Instagram, and she has like a highlight that shows you how to breastfeed in a carrier, and it's really quite easy. But it's just all about practice, really. Practice makes perfect. You sort of loosen the carrier, shimmy baby down so that they're at the same height as your breasts, and then you just make sure that their neck is supported at all times, and it's just as simple as that, really. But I'd also recommend having breastfeeding friendly clothing, so you're not having to dredge up loads of fabric from underneath the carrier. Like you just have really easy access. Like this just has a zipper going across, so you could just unzip that part and baby's right there feeding, or having a low cut vest so you can pull it down. Of course, in this weather though, might not be the best option. But yeah, having a carrier, learning how to feed in the carrier, having easy access clothing. One thing again that I will mention is not necessarily anything quite physical, but it's more to do with psychological thoughts and feelings. So I know so many women who have not breastfed in public or have not wanted to because they were scared that somebody would say something or they were scared that somebody would ask them to leave, or they were just like, people would just be looking and this is not something that I want to do. But you just have to know that it's really important to know that you are legally protected to breastfeed in public. Like nobody can tell you that you shouldn't be doing that or that you have to leave. Like legally, you are protected by law, and anybody who comes to tell you any of those things, they are breaking the law. So you are allowed to breastfeed. Just as anyone's allowed to eat, your baby's allowed to breastfeed anywhere. There are some places that are exempt. I think I've never been to one of these places, so I can't really remember off the top of my head. I think some, maybe, I don't know, some like religious houses and stuff like that. But on the grand scheme of things, you can breastfeed anywhere. On the bus, breastfeed. On the airplane, breastfeed it. On the side of the pool, breastfeed. I don't know if you're allowed to breastfeed in the water, but you know, like there's just loads of places where you can breastfeed, which is basically everywhere. Go with someone who has your back. Go with someone who is there to support you, because it just helps. It helps to know that you've got that moral support. When I first breastfed, I was terrified. I was in a cafe with a friend. We actually went out so I could practice breastfeeding in public. That's how much she had my back. Like we both had babies. She had her second child. This was my first child. And she was like, let's just go to a cafe and let's breastfeed. And I was like, let's do what? Where? No way. But I did it anyway, and nothing happened. Nobody looked, nobody said anything, and it was fine. And then the next time I did it again, nothing happened. I just fed my baby and I carried on chilling out. And I think that's why practice helps, because you will get to see that nothing's going to happen. And, you know, sometimes you see these viral videos that go around and people are saying stuff about breastfeeding. They're viral because it's not that common. It's so ridiculous that someone would have something to say. And on the odd occasion that somebody does say something, you have a few choices. You can either address that what they're doing is basically illegal and they should leave you alone, or you could ignore them. You should never leave though. You should never feel that you have to go away because you're doing something wrong, because you're absolutely not. Another one is how to feel comfortable extended breastfeeding in public, or just extended breastfeeding in general. So most people who breastfeed in public are breastfeeding smaller babies. And most people who see that are quite used to or understand that you're feeding a smaller baby. As your baby grows, sometimes people have things to say. Oh, she's got teeth, she shouldn't be feeding, or she can talk, she shouldn't be feeding. I've had all of these. What most people are unaware of is the fact that the natural age for weaning for all, like most mammals, including human beings, is age 4 years to 7 years. Like years. This is not 4 months, this is 4 years. So it's normal for a child to feed up to these ages. it's natural for a child to feed up to these ages. It's not necessarily normal for us to see it. And that's why we may begin to feel uncomfortable. And that's why other people may begin to feel uncomfortable seeing older children breastfeed. But it's completely normal. It's completely natural. And I think I've always come from a position, perspective that whoever has anything negative to say, because my daughter was older, they're ignorant. They just don't know really what they're talking about. They have their opinions, and that's fine. It's just not informed. And so therefore I'm not going to take it on as anything that should impact my life or my choice on how I'm going to do things. And so that helped me, just seeing everyone as ignorant. But then I also had loads of people being like, oh, that's so amazing. You know, like, I wish I could have breastfed for 4 years. I wish I could have kept going. And so that was really, really helpful. How long have we got left? We got a little while left. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our weaning journey, and then I'm going to go through 1 or 2 more questions. So if anybody's got any questions, let me just check. If anybody's got any questions, then let me know in the chat, and then I will be able to respond. This is like the first time I've done a Zoom on my laptop, so everything's all completely new to me. But yes, okay, so weaning. Oh, how we weaned. Weaning. Some days I felt like I was just like, I'm done now, never ever feeding her ever again. Like, I'm just so done. And then other days it's like, oh, but she's not ready to stop, let me keep going. And it was just this massive conflict. I knew that we were ready to wean because of how I was feeling. She wanted to like just constantly feed. And this is Jasmine's my older daughter. But I was like, I'm ready because of the way I feel. I used to really enjoy breastfeeding her. And it makes me emotional because I'm like, I can't believe I've come to a place where I don't enjoy it anymore, but I didn't enjoy it and it was making me really frustrated. And so I decided that now is the time that I'm going to start to wean. I night weaned her in, oh my God, it's going to make me cry as well. I night weaned her when I was pregnant with Ocean, and I did that because of the nursing aversion. I really couldn't bear it at night. And I was by myself at night. Like, my partner worked nights and it was just me and her, and I'd be crying and she'd be crying and we'd be screaming and I'd storm out and she'd come to find me. And it was the most difficult. It was really difficult. But I night weaned her, and I wouldn't recommend doing it that way. So I'm not even going to tell you how we did that. It was just, like I said, it was just lots of screaming. But this time around, when it came to weaning her, it was an informed decision. I knew that I didn't feel like I wanted to breastfeed anymore, and that we were slowly going to come to the end of our journey. And it just was that, you know, she would ask in the morning and I'd feed her in the morning, and then she'd ask again and I would distract her with food, I'd distract her with a game, I'd distract her with a drink, I'd distract her with a walk, like literally anything I could think of, like, let's just not have this feed right now. And then she might ask again when she, you know, she forgets about that, whatever we were doing. And then I distract her again, or maybe I would feed her this time because we missed one before. I also spent quite a bit of time away from her, so I would just be out all the time. Well, I wasn't out all the time, but I would actively leave the house more often than not. So maybe I'd go for a run, or I'd go and see a friend. Well, I probably didn't because it's lockdown. I don't know what I did, but I just wasn't at home. And then that long stretch of her not being with me sort of aided her in her weaning journey. And then also she was back at nursery when we really finished our journey. And it's because she was away for the day, 3 days a week. On the days that she was at home, she would ask, and I was feeling bad the whole time, just so much guilt. So I would feed her. And then one day I had a job. It was 3 days long, and I had to travel out for the whole day for 3 days. And then I just said, it's been 3 days that you haven't fed. She's going to have one last feed this morning. And then I think that's fine. And then that was it. That morning I explained to her, I said, I'm going to feed you now, but this is going to be the last feed. And she said, yes, okay. And I said, what? Did you just say okay? Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, there's no more feeds now. And she said, yeah, okay. And I was like, I don't think she's understanding me. But she obviously did understand. She did ask me again later, but I explained that we had the conversation, and she said, oh yeah. And she stopped. And I think weaning them slightly later, when they're older and they can understand, it helps because you can have this conversation. Even if you have it like every day or once a week and you just explain that we're going to stop soon, they actually understand it. Now thinking about maybe weaning Ocean, I don't really know how I would like what I would say to her. I would still speak to her because I think they understand. I think they do understand, and we kind of underestimate babies. But I don't think we couldn't have the same sort of conversation that I had with Jasmine. But there are still ways to do it. Again, lots of distraction, lots of alternatives, lots of here you go, daddy, or other mummy, or what, grandma, whoever. And you just spend a bit more time apart during that period of weaning. Okay, so I've got 2 questions. How do you know the baby is latched correctly and getting enough milk? Any advice for inverted nipples? Okay, so to know that the baby's latched correctly, you have to, really wish I had like one of those boobs. I had a knitted boob and I can't find it. So you have to make sure that the baby's mouth is not only on the nipple. So it shouldn't be on the nipple, it should be on the breast. There should be a large chunk of skin of the areola in the baby's mouth. And you should be able to see a little bit of the areola at the top. And it should be, their chin should be right up against the breast. And that's how you know they've got a really wide latch. If you look at the corner of their mouth here and it looks quite closed, then that's not a great latch. It should be really open. Like, I can't like, it just should be really, really wide latch. And how do you know that they're getting enough milk? The only real way to know is if they are weeing and pooping. So if you're changing enough nappies and if their nappies are wet, you know that they're weeing, then that is the best indication that they are getting enough milk. If you are not sure, if they are not having lots of wet nappies, and if they have dry lips, if their eyes look dry, and if this oh gosh, what do you call it? You know, the soft spot. If the soft spot feels dipped in, then they're probably dehydrated and they're not getting enough milk. So those are some things that you can check if you're not sure. But yeah, so that's it. Any advice for inverted nipples? I would say, like, the only, like, I've been doing some training, and in that training, the only advice that I came across really was just making sure the latch is good. It shouldn't make much difference, so long as they're on the areola, because it's not the nipple that they are latching onto. It's not the nipple either that brings the milk out, it's the areola. It's all about the breast. So if you have got inverted nipples, so long as the baby's latched on well with a lot of the areola in their mouth, and you can help them by turning your breast into sort of like hamburger and like making sure that they're really on it, that should help. But if you are having trouble because of inverted nipples, then I would definitely say, like, speak to an independent or a lactation consultant for you independently, if that makes sense. Like, this is a general chat what I'm doing, so like have a one-to-one so that they can actually see what's going on and see how you're latching. That would be my best advice. And I think it's worth it as well. Like, I think definitely worth it. There is a few more questions. Okay, you're about to get lots of face while I read these. Did you keep going breastfeeding when your nipples were hurting and bleeding? Yeah, so this one's from Nicole. Yeah, I did. I was a little bit worried when my breasts were bleeding, especially when I was pumping, because I was like, what is going on? Like, there's blood in the milk. And I showed the midwife and she said it's fine. If the baby was latched on directly, she would continue to get that blood, really. And the milk is made from your blood anyway. So yeah, I kept going, and it was really difficult. It was really painful, but it's just all about making sure that baby's latched well. And I know I keep saying it, and I know how frustrating it can be when you're trying to, and it just doesn't feel like it's working. But just go mostly with how it feels. Does it feel okay? And I know it's hard to judge when your breasts are already hurting. So you just have to keep going and see if the pain is easing. What usually happens is, the reason why it hurts is because if you feel in your mouth, there you've got the hard part at the front, and if you slide your tongue all the way to the back, you've got like this soft part. The nipple needs to be right at the back, like touching your tonsils right at the back. So they need to have enough breast in their mouth so that the nipple's right at the back. And when they're feeding and your nipple's at the back, it's soft, there's nothing pinching the nipple. But when they're not latched on properly and they haven't got enough breast in their mouth, the nipple's quite close to the front, and it's near the hard part of the hard palate of the top of your mouth, and that's what's pinching. So you just need to literally like shove baby's head on. That's what helped for me. The midwife came round and she was like, can I help you? And I said, absolutely, I need all the help in the world. And she grabbed my breast like this, and she grabbed the baby's sort of like head and shoved her on, and I was like, I can't believe she just did that to my baby. But it honestly, it helped because she was really, really on. I think the best advice or best position for that, if you're struggling to make sure baby's got enough in their mouth, is to sort of slam them on, but to do it in a leaned back position. So maybe like you're leaning back in bed, or try and like you're laying down, and then baby gravity will help baby sort of get lots of breast in their mouth. I feel like I'm acting like a massive baby, but yeah, I hope that helped. If you're still a little bit confused, then just like let me know. Is it safe to feed baby breast milk then formula in the same day? Yes, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Lots of people do combination feeding for many different reasons, and it's completely safe. Just make sure that your baby hasn't got a dairy like intolerance or anything like that. Lots of babies do, lots of babies don't. That will be the only scenario that I can think of it not being safe, if they are not okay to drink formula, if they're not okay to drink dairy or cow's milk. But other than that, it should be absolutely safe. How do you allow sore nipples to heal whilst exclusively breastfeeding? Yeah, so what I did, I would pump. So I was pumping, and I don't really know. Like, I want to say it kind of helped it to heal, but actually, like, I was sort of, it kind of hurt as well. The best thing is to use, I used like a nipple balm, which helped. I think it was like Lancino nipple balm. And that really helped. But what's even better than that, wait for it, drum roll please. No, but what's even better than that is breast milk. Like breast milk, honestly, like squirt breast milk on 2020. Breast milk is the best thing for everything. So if you just express a little bit of breast milk and rub it around, let it air dry, and do that as many times, and literally take off your bra, like go topless completely, like you're on a nude beach topless, and just let your boobs have fresh air, have the breast milk on there, because breast milk has healing properties. That is the best thing to allow your nipples to heal whilst exclusively breastfeeding, and do that as often as you can. And just explain to your family why you're completely nude, but you need to let your boobs, you need to let them heal. So, I've done. I think I'm done. Yeah, all right, I've answered those questions. I think there's another one, so I'm gonna get around. Oh, there's a few more. Okay. How do you know if babies, oh, I've already answered that one. Okay, any recommendations for breast pump? Yes, so I have used 3 different breast pumps. I have also partnered with LV, and I'm telling you this because I'm going to recommend them, but I also just want to sort of disclose that I've worked with them before. They've paid me to do some work for them. So I would recommend LV for pumping on the go. So if you want to be in a cafe, if you want to be at someone's house, you can just literally put it in there and you can't even tell. I mean, I wish I had it with me right now. Like, you wouldn't even be able to tell that you're breastfeeding, and you can pump, and it's great. Another one that I found really good, and one that I lived by, was Haka. It's a silicone pump. And I think it's sold more as a collection, like to collect the milk rather than to actually pump. But you just sort of squeeze it, you put it on, and then the milk comes out, and you can hand express into it. If you don't follow me on Instagram, follow me at Shanine Sally, or at Chic and Discreet. I will type those in. I'm sorry, I can't remember which page I've put it on, but I've put these breast pump demonstrations, sort of like how to use them, how you sort of fold it back and squeeze it on. I've put those demonstrations, and they should be in the highlights. So I'll just type those here, and you'll be able to find them. Or you don't even have to follow me, you can just go and have a look, because both the pages are public. And then the last one that I used, I got a double breast pump from Avent, which was quite good. It was probably the most technical of all of them, because, you know, there was so many different parts. But as with most breast pumps, there are lots of different parts. So the Avent one, it was good. I got the double breast pump, and I think it really helped my supply. Like I said, I was able to donate breast milk while breastfeeding, tandem feeding actually, and then I was pumping so much milk before, because both breasts were being stimulated almost all day long. And so those are my 3 recommendations: the LV pump, which is hands-free; the Haka pump, which can potentially be hands-free, but it's just like a silicone milk collector; and then the Avent double pump. They were all fantastic. Okay, I think I've answered all your questions. Oh no, there's one. So it says, my right boob has not been used as much. Positioning baby doesn't feel as comfortable and easy as using the left boob. Is it just practice? Will it become easier? Any tips on sharing boobs equally, or does that not matter? Just massively to ease your mind. The most important thing to remember is, you know, one baby, one boob can be fine. Like some people literally only feed from one side. What can happen is you're going to look very lopsided, but that's fine because doesn't matter about how we look, right? But yeah, so that's okay. It doesn't matter that much. But if you do want to practice and feed baby more on the other side, then put baby on that side, not when baby is really, really hungry, because they're going to be a bit more like, oh, you know, like I just want to feed now. And like, what is this? It's not so comfortable. But maybe feed baby first on the left side and then move baby over to the right side. And then it will become easier. How old is your little one, if you don't mind me asking? Because if it's still really early days, it could be that it's a letdown. And when babies are really young and you still have a lot of milk coming out, it could be that they're not in like a comfortable enough position on that particular side, and the letdown when the milk comes out is just too much, and they just, 3 days, that's really, really young. So it will definitely get better. At this point, I would say rest is the most important thing. So if it's easy for you to feed on just the right boob, then feed on the right boob and pump on the left boob. And then once baby's a bit older and you've gotten the hang of it a bit more, then you'll be able to like sort of practice. But at 3 days is so new. Just make sure you're expressing milk so you maintain supply on both sides, but just don't worry about it, because honestly, it's fine. Like I technically only really use one boob with my daughter now. So I put her on both because I just want to maintain the supply, but really and truly, like she's just always on the left, and that one is huge compared to the other one. So I've answered those. This has been great. Thank you all for your questions. Thank you for being here and listening to my story. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I think I might just have one more question on here. So I spoke about biting. Let's talk about biting. How long have I got left? Rachel, if you could just let me know if I'm going too long.
However long you want, you've got like 5 more minutes really. But okay. As long as you want.
Thank you. So biting. Ouch. This is my least favorite thing, I guess. There's quite a few things that can be quite painful with breastfeeding, such as engorgement, mastitis, which I haven't even covered. But biting is one that you just have to try and communicate to the baby that this is not okay. I think the one thing that we tend to do when we get bitten is to jump, scream, and then, you know, get the baby off. And I do that all the time. Well, not anymore, but I did do that a lot. But what then happens is baby notices they get a reaction from doing this act and they continue to do it. So what's really important is for you to be as calm as possible, pretend that nothing in the world hurts, and unlatch baby and just do everything calmly and quietly. And so baby realizes they don't get a reaction and they don't want to stop feeding, so they're going to stop biting you. Ideally, that's what the ideal situation is. There are a few different reasons why babies bite. And I'd say the most common one is so the question was, my son is 7 months, breastfeeding and bottle feeding, and you want to build your supply again. He has 6 teeth, 4 at the top, 2 at the bottom. Yeah, so he's getting teeth now. He bites and the nipple shields won't work because he takes them off. So he's teething. I'd say one thing that you could do is to put something on his teeth, on his gums before a feed. So maybe that will be ice, and a breast milk ice lolly. Maybe it will be, you know, some of the powders. We didn't really use much, so I don't really know actually what's out there, but just put something in there to calm down their gums so it's not so itchy, so that they don't feel like they need to use you to bite and to soothe that. And then there are some other reasons why baby bites. It could be that as they get teeth, everything changes. Every single time there's a new set of teeth, the latch changes again. So it's a lot of work for the baby to be latched on in a good enough position so that they're still getting enough milk. And sometimes out of frustration, because they're no longer latched on well, they begin to bite again. So again, just keep an eye on making sure that your baby is latched on well. It's all about the latch. And making sure that you pick up any patterns. So there are so many things that you can read. There's so many different experiences that you can hear about, but every child is different. Every experience is different. Every boob is different. So you just have to make sure that you are paying attention. Like if they always bite just before letdown, or if they always bite towards the end of a feed, or when they look sleepy, or if they always bite when there's when the dog comes in, then you begin to look at that and pick up that and be like, okay, they could potentially bite me now, and unlatch them just before it happens. And then they get out of the habit, hopefully, of biting. Other than that, again, it's just patience. I think there's a lot of patience that's going to be needed while you're breastfeeding. And there's mums that we've been through a lot of stuff, and we can give our best advice, but you and your instincts are the most important thing for you to follow. Yeah, and also keep a finger handy just to unlatch as quickly as you possibly can, because it really, really can hurt. But just don't let baby continue to bite. Okay, and I mentioned mastitis. I didn't actually have any notes on that, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what I know. So in the early days, sometimes it is I've seen women who have mastitis, or they have engorged boobs, or they have blocked milk ducts, and that really, really hurts. And some of the best ways for you to get rid of that, or with mastitis, you a lot of times have to go and see a GP and get put onto some sort of medication. But with like blocked milk duct and engorgement, using like electric toothbrush or a vibrator or something, you just put it and you sort of let it vibrate and shake the milk out, and then you sort of hand express, how I showed you with my own boobs earlier, hand express as much as you can out, and that should help reduce it. I did have blocked milk ducts once, and it was so incredibly painful to feed. It was so incredibly painful to just have boobs. And again, it was my friend who was like, get an electric toothbrush or a vibrator and just use that, and then use like heat compress or warm compress, so like a hot water bottle wrapped up so it's not too hot, or a hot shower head, and you sort of just like basically just get the milk moving and get it out. And then if you do go through that, then make sure you're feeding baby on that side as much as possible, because nothing and no one gets the milk out as well as baby does. So yeah, thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to do one final check of the questions. So I think I've answered that. I think I've answered everything. I've had such a great time talking to you. If there's any questions that you didn't want to ask here for any reason, you can always come and DM me on my page. I've put it into the chat, which is @Shaneen Sally. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm so glad it was brilliant. I was so nervous before. My twins have mostly been bottle fed EBM for 5 months, but I would like them back on my breast. Any advice? Sorry, Rich, I'm just gonna answer this last one.
Fine, don't worry now.
Yeah, so yeah, so it's again, it's about the latch. You're just gonna have to help them with the latch. I think maybe a good entryway into this would be for you to use nipple shields, because the nipple shields are sort of like part way between breastfeeding and bottle feeding. So maybe introduce nipple shields, and then slowly as they work on the latch with that, then you can take them off, and then they are feeding exclusively at the breast again. But incredible, well done that you've been able to go 5 months doing that. I think that's phenomenal. Just like, that's so good for twins. I'm just so proud of you right now. Like I'm like getting goosebumps. I'm like, oh my gosh. But I think yeah, so try nipple chills and try and just help them with the latch, and have patience, and you can do this. You honestly can. Also seek advice from like a lactation consultant, because after 5 months of being on on the bottle, then it could be that maybe they're not used to it. They're not really, because the bottle head is quite small compared to a breast. So just maybe get help from a lactation consultant. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you so much for being here. I am going to wrap up now. I think I've answered all of them. Thank you so much, Rachel, for having me.
Oh, no.